Morning, boys and girls. Let's review just a little bit. We're going to be talking about the founding of Maryland and Georgia, but let's review a little bit of what we've already learned. We'll do that by asking and answering questions. So, what cash crop saved Jamestown and helped other southern colonies to prosper? Tobacco. What is the name given to settlers whose passage to North America was paid for by someone else and who, in return, agreed to work for that person for a time, usually 7 years? Indentured servants. What group of people was forced to come to North America from Africa to work for no pay and denied the freedom to decide how to live their lives? Enslaved Africans. What 3 crops were planted as cash crops in the Carolinas? That's us, we're in North Carolina. 3 cash crops: tobacco, rice, and indigo. And what was the name given to the trade route from Europe to Africa to North America? Triangular trade route. And then the route that was from West Africa to America was called the Middle Passage. Today, we're going to hear about several lawmaking groups. One you'll hear about is Parliament. Parliament is the lawmaking group in the government of Great Britain, which is England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Parliament has many members, and the leading member is the British Prime Minister. In today's read aloud, the words Assembly and House are used to describe lawmaking groups in the colonies. There was the House of Burgesses that you've already heard about, and that's the governing group in the colony of Virginia. Keep in mind that these groups in each colony were distinct and separate at that time. There wasn't any United States, but each group that came over set up a new and different government. But they were all influenced by the rules and laws of Parliament in Great Britain. So listen carefully to the main ideas or important points about why people left England and other parts of Europe to become colonists in the southern region of North America. Pay attention to certain problems that seem to be solved in the colonies, but which were replaced with new problems. And this is called the founding of Maryland and Georgia. With so much trade going on and the abundance of ships laden with valuable cargo, it's inevitable or unavoidable that pirates would make an appearance in this story. Pirates are people who steal goods from others while they're at sea. The English colonies, particularly those in the southern region and the West Indies, became well known as places where pirates hid from the law. These pirates were known as buccaneers. Buccaneers were a group of men from England, France, and Holland. They terrorized sailors and captured trade ships in this region. Because of the success of the infamous pirates, some countries were forced to send naval ships to the New World to accompany their trade ships safely back and forth to port. This New World was turning out to be a place where all kinds of people had an opportunity to become rich. Back on land, the English colonies were expanding. Today, you will learn about 2 more colonies, Maryland and Georgia. Both of these colonies have an interesting history. However, the development of Maryland and Georgia is a little different from that of Virginia. Let's begin with Maryland. As you learned about the large plantations that were prevalent in the South, Maryland was considered a southern colony, though it was geographically in the Middle Atlantic region. Although there were many small farms in Maryland, there were a fair number of large plantations in the southern portion. Like Virginia, Maryland's economy was based on tobacco agriculture as a cash crop. Before he was killed, King Charles I had given a large section of land in north of Virginia to a friend. This time the lucky recipient of the land was Sir George Calvert. Sir Calvert, who was also known as Lord Baltimore, received this generous gift in 1632. Sir Calvert was a Roman Catholic. In England at that time, Roman Catholics were not very well liked because they were not part of the official Church of England. The Church of England, the Anglican Church, had split apart from the Roman Catholic Church. Many people in England at that time believed that Roman Catholics would be more loyal to the Catholic Pope than to the king, and they did not like that. However, because King Charles's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, was Catholic, Charles tried to be respectful of Catholics for her sake. Delighted by Charles's gift, Sir Calvert named the colony Maryland in honor of Queen Maria. Maryland was different from Virginia because it was controlled by Sir Calvert's family. Sir Calvert's son, Cecil, determined that Maryland would be a safe haven for Catholics. In the beginning, it was. In fact, in 1634, Cecil's brother, Lord Calvert, led the first group of Catholics to this colony. Leonard Calvert later became the first governor of Maryland. The colonists in Maryland made it a priority to make peace with local Native Americans right away. They did not waste time searching for gold, but instead immediately established farms and trading posts. They soon settled into organized communities with laws that were clearly defined. Excuse me for coughing. It wasn't long before word got out that Maryland was quite a nice place to live. Europeans searching for a better life, free of poverty and religious persecution, journeyed to this colony. And it wasn't just Roman Catholics who came. Other Christians who belonged to different churches came to settle in Maryland too. Before long, Maryland became known as a place that practiced religious freedom. So much so that in 1649, Lord Baltimore had the Maryland General Assembly pass the Act of Toleration. This law stated that all Christians in Maryland would be tolerated or allowed the freedom of worship. This law confirmed that Christians from different churches, Protestants, Catholics, and others, could perform their religion without interference. The last southern colony to be founded was Georgia. One day, a member of Parliament in London, England, named George Oglethorpe, had a brainstorm. Oglethorpe had noticed that English jails were overflowing with debtors. Debtors are people who owe money to other people. In England during this time, people were put in jail, called a debtor's prison, if they were unable to pay their debts. Sometimes these jail debtors owed a little bit of money, and sometimes they owed a lot. Oglethorpe had noticed that these debtors, even those that owed a relatively small amount of money, were often left in jail to die without any way of paying back the money that they owed. Oglethorpe's unique idea was to set up a new colony in North America where these debtors would be given a second chance. They would be given land so they could begin a new life. They could work to pay back the money they owed, and then the debt would be forgiven. In 1732, the then King George II liked this idea. He gave Oglethorpe a charter saying that he could take a band of debtors from England to the area of land between South Carolina and Spanish Florida. The British Parliament supported this venture by giving Oglethorpe money and ships to make the journey. Upon reaching the new land, Oglethorpe named it Georgia after His Royal Majesty. Kings just expected new lands to be named after them. Georgia was even larger back then than the state of Georgia is today. It includes much of present-day Alabama and Mississippi, so that was quite a nice piece of land King George just gave to James Oglethorpe. However, even though sending debtors to the New World seemed like a brilliant plan to Oglethorpe and the king, it was difficult to persuade many debtors to leave their families and homeland and sail 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean to a place where they might not be welcomed with open arms. Once they arrived, the debtors would have to build their own homes as well as gather, hunt, and grow their own food. Many debtors preferred to serve their time in jail in England rather than face the unknown in the New World. Some might say, beggars can't be choosers. which sort of means that they're not in a position to be picky about things that are given to them. But in all, only about 100 debtors agreed to go on the journey to North America. They began the laborious task of helping to turn Georgia into a colony. As soon as he arrived in Georgia, Oglethorpe met with the leader of the Yamacraw, a group of Native Americans in the region. Chief Tomochichi and the Yamacraw were willing to trade with the English and to allow them to settle there. Oglethorpe worked hard to establish alliances with the Yamacraw and even invited some of them to visit England. Oglethorpe and his band of debtors developed the first settlement in Georgia, Savannah. Try to get this little map so we can see the whole thing. Ooh, dang. Okay, so we just talked about Maryland. Maryland is tucked right here. You see that it's still one of the southern colonies, but it's the northernmost southern colony. You can see the name here with the little arrow. Virginia, then North Carolina, South Carolina, and then we're just talking about Georgia with Savannah right there. Of course, King George had another motive for sending settlers to Georgia, besides helping debtors to start a new life. As you can see on the map, Georgia is located between the Carolinas and what was then known as Spanish Florida. At this point, the British had not established any official colonies to the south of South Carolina, so this was the perfect way to protect the colonies from the Spanish. Georgia would serve as a buffer zone to separate English colonies from Spanish colonies. This would also allow colonists to keep an eye on the Spanish ambitions for growth in North America. But King George did not realize that the Spanish had already claimed the very area that he had in mind. It wasn't long before there was armed confrontation between the Spanish and the British. Armed confrontation would be battles. As time went by, more and more settlers arrived in Georgia. Some of them did not get along with the native people as well as Oglethorpe and his followers had. The Spanish continued to stake their claim in the land, and buccaneers often attacked vital trade ships. This new colony, the last one to be created, suffered its fair share of problems in its early days. Whereas few debtors would agree to come and settle in Georgia, many poor Europeans from other countries began to arrive and establish farms in this colony. They came primarily from Ireland and Germany. Georgian farmers liked the idea of plantation farming, as it had proven successful in other southern colonies. However, the colonists soon found farming to be a back-breaking job and insisted that they needed help. Although it was first decided that Georgia would be a slave-free colony, the introduction of slavery slowly began. Before long, Georgia became a colony identified with plantation life and the heavy use of enslaved laborers. Within 100 years of being established, the state of Georgia had more plantations than any other state in the South, and the second largest number of enslaved Africans, second only to Virginia. Sad. All right, that's our reading for today.